Good afternoon. This is Professor Al-Deen for Muslim Network TV, and I am the host of Critical Talk. Today, I want us to think about what's been lost in all these conversations that are roaming around, especially with regard to social justice issues, things that are happening under the radar, and there's so many things happening. How do we, as an audience involved in continuing education, to continuing learning about uh, issues and how to analyze them, how to skirt the news. How do we keep up? And are there issues which should remain priorities but have kind of slid off the table? Black Lives Matter is a movement. Have we now dissected it down into little bitty parts to make it nothing? There's still protests, even though the protest content has shifted to a post election debacle. Today with me, I have two wonderfully exciting women. One is Marguerite Hill, who is the co founder and executive director of Muslim Anti Racism Collaborative, which we all fondly know of as Muslim ARC. It's a human rights education organization, co-founding, co-director of Black Muslim COVID Coalition also. She has many other accolades, but I don't have but one show, and if I read them all, it would be too long. Our second guest is Professor Maytha Alhassen, who is an historian, journalist, social justice artist, and mending practitioner. I got to get with that second part there. Her work bridges the worlds of organizing academic research, media engagement, artistic expression, and spiritually guided healing practices. I need some of that too. And her newest horizon has been TV and film writing and consulting. I know you ladies from both a same kind of venue that we had the other week, and loads of issues came up, and you all were just schooling me. I even got out a darn notebook. And then I'm saying, oh my God, I got to listen and write at the same time, like being back in school. And then one of the things that was clear was what's going on? What's slipping under the radar that we need to push back to the forefront in all the ways that we can? Either one of you, just lay back and let it roll. Today.
Well, I'll kind of hop in and I want to open up space for Dr. Maytha Alhassen, who really has her finger on the pulse of like politics, right? And understanding that from like, both from a global scale, but also within US politics. But obviously there's just so much going on, and the way that I tend to understand when I'm looking for what's happening ever since Ferguson, I will go to social media to see what my people are saying, right? When you put your, like you got to put your ear to the ground or to the rail, and it's like, okay, what's coming down the pike, and hearing from organizers, hearing from people who are talking about what's happening on the Hill, what's happening in Washington, right? There's this talk of a kind of like a possible, this transition. It's going to like a rough transition. There's talk of a coup.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is still a very uncertain time, right? We've had marches in DC, the Proud Boys, so white supremacist groups, right? White identity extremists are now marching, right? We we're still in a climate of uncertainty and great transition, and what I'm still hearing from organizers and groups is like there's spikes in hate crimes.
Yes.
still intimidation. We're having recounts, right? There's the questions around certifying. There's still voter suppression and attempts of that. So all of these are going on as we're trying, like while we're understanding we're celebrating the defeat of Donald Trump within the popular vote, but also within the problematic electoral college. And it's clear, but the people don't want to certify people of color votes in these cities of Philadelphia, right? They're challenging Black folks in Philadelphia, Black folks in Detroit. They're challenging people of color, predominantly Black folks in Georgia. And so, we still have a lot of struggle to through this, the final stages of this election where we know there's a clear winner, but yet there's a lot of us, we got we got a whipping through it to make that win.
Yeah. Maytha?
Yeah, I wanted to hear from Marguerite first, so that was a selfish
Yeah.
move because she's, as an organizer for a long time, not just in the Muslim community, but in the social justice space, she has her ear to the ground, and also in the digital world, as she broke down, that is really prescient. Organizers and historians, although they have their feet rooted either in the here or in the past, they really are our future tellers. They know what's going on because they've gone experientially through it, or they've seen it happen over and over again in the history of the work that they've done. And we are in strangely in unprecedented times, but that doesn't mean that these attempts at reversal haven't happened before, or that they haven't been successful. So what we also have to name is that we've watched coups in front of our eyes. In 2000, the refusal to count 10,000 votes in southern Florida, again, mostly people of color, and then to lead with a 537 vote margin for George Bush was a coup. And so and that was a period where we just had, some 24-hour news networks. We had some networks, corporate ones, but we did not have social media putting the spotlight on the wrongdoing. So I think now we're in a very different time, but also we're watching a president during this alleged lame duck period put all his focus and attention on reversing the results, which are overwhelmingly towards a Biden-Harris victory, like 6-7 million point spread. And as Marguerite said, the Electoral College, although there are slim margins in certain states, in 2000 there was there, and he's abdicating his responsibilities in the crisis of a rising, surging COVID infection and death rate. So these are the things that we're going to be telling our children
about. Okay. I think that, one of the things is we need to think about what is driving this other side. We can't just dismiss them as crazies, right? Because they could just dismiss us as crazies too. On the other tempo, we kind of have to think of when we're talking about, and we ran into this yesterday. When we talk about social justice, how do audiences understand that? Then number 3, there is a divide in communication. Younger people, let's say 50 and under, understand more about, and not all of them, the workings of social media. Those who have lived through past reiterations of this do not live on social media. They are used to the TV, the newspaper, and word of mouth. And if you ignore them, then you've lost all of your wisdom and all of your history. So how do we come back and put all those things together, sit back, reflect, and get our priorities straight? Muslim art is focused on anti-racism stuff. That has always been a part of America's fabric. It will be a part of America's fabric. The need for it is forever. But we have a president who has said any federal agency or institution associated with his money can't do it. How do we, what's the nexus here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, go on.
Well, I mean, there's a few points I wanted to touch bases on and one is the generational, right? And recognizing like in this unprecedented time where we can't even gather safely, there is that risk, right, of losing the contact connections across intergenerational connections and the focus right on digital organizing also. And that's why, like, even early on, for the Black Muslim COVID Coalition, with the focus on the wisdom of our elders, of reaching out to elders, right, and checking on them and building with them, was important. And the work of historian Zahira Ali, right, of doing the oral histories is absolutely essential. It's absolutely essential um, to support organizing and really, because really at the core of community organizing, and this is where we build people power, is the relationships that you have with individuals, whether it's face to face or on the phone. Like, this is not just about tweets, right? When we're doing even digital organizing, maybe that's the first step, but it's actually that begins that relationship, and knowing that it's not just on social media. So it's like, like I just texted one of my former fellows, and she's actually a mentor. Like, she's she's around my mother's age, right? So it's like being on the phone with other organizers, and she's working on feeding folks in Los Angeles, which leads to getting people who are unhoused housing. And so, it's understanding that digital organizing is one step of that, but there's also those deeper connections, and supporting that deep work in institutional history. That's important. I think there was a few other points, if because that was just like one component. So May, if you can maybe tackle one of the many issues that Professor Amina brought up.
Well, I kind of have a controversial definition for maybe the non-Muslims, or maybe even the Muslims who deride us as social justice warriors of social justice. And that is basically the English definition of Sharia, which is way to the water. And that's what organizers are doing, is trying to create a pathway to livelihood on this earth that feeds and hydrates everybody, and hydrates the earth and keeps us in balance and that kind of equilibrium that we can live our lives to the fullest. And not in like a pursuit of happiness, Western liberalism way, but in a way that we can achieve the destiny of our fate and our faith, right? So within that framework, and thinking about the earlier comment that you made and where you were headed with the kind of generational gap, Marguerite, which is, how do we communicate with people who might have a different language to understand the demands, the conversation, the discourse in social justice?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think about a couple of things. There are people who've experienced protests, uprisings that are over 50, and they are on social media, but where are they at? Mostly like Facebook, right? Or in their WhatsApp groups, or maybe not even Facebook, but even in, or some of these other sort of spaces. But I think okay, let's tackle a couple of them. But like the ones, because I'm just thinking about my parents' generation, my dad who came here after Martin Luther King was shot, like right after that, and that inaugurated him to trying to figure out how to understand racial politics in America, or the people that I've studied who communicated with Malcolm X and then came to Detroit in the summer of the uprisings, and they were also trying to understand from that vantage point. Those folks, some of them are online, and the issue that we're trying to communicate is one of critical media literacy, and that is, what is the information that's coming your way, which you should also apply when you're watching the news, right? And just depending on it as your connection point, your source of information. I mean, even the younger generation is susceptible to this. The way that certain messages are marketed towards them, a narrative that is pushed onto them. Like this is what we saw with people from the left who accepted QAnon belief systems or Russian propaganda. It went through all age groups, but the power of investing or using that inclination towards distrust in the media, which we should have a certain skepticism. That media hasn't portrayed us properly and hasn't until recently incorporated our voices. But what we need to do instead is really think about the entire media landscape, the agendas that each one have, put them in conversation, and then coming to the, it's almost like when we look at differing opinions from exegesis, right? And jurisprudence, we compare what different scholars have said and then try to come at it as consensus or not consensus about an issue. And if we want to go back to this president and what you were talking about in terms of racial justice and his reversal or his pulling away of federal money for any contractors that train or use critical race studies, that is a massive disjuncture. Yeah. It's a massive disjuncture. And I know we're gonna talk about affirmative action. I was looking at the history of different affirmative action executive orders and court cases, and it was interesting. It was bipartisan for the most part. There was a reversal, like in the mid 1990s, but the fact that this president is making it a Republican issue to go really hard on, you know, what Marguerite mentioned, which is white identity extremism. He put all his eggs in that basket, and we are going to have to deal with that for generations.
This is Professor Al-Deen, and I'm speaking with Marguerite Hill and Maytha Alhassen, and we're talking about a little bit of everything, but primarily about social justice post-election. We will be right back.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's world, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. To keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
We're back. This is Critical Talk with Professor Al-Deen, with Marguerite Hill and Maytha Alhassen. And I have to say this in support of all of us who are just slightly older than you, darlings. There was a whole revolution in this country that didn't have social media. One. Two, you all spend so much time on your phones. How do you connect? If I had spent that much time on my phones, I would have not had the energy or the focus to connect with my children, because they get used to trying to vie for. I watch with my own kids. My grandkids have to vie for their attention away from the darn phone. And that is such a media overload for me, because I don't have time to reflect. You know, one of the things we've done on Critical Talk in recent weeks is I've been interviewing screenwriters, actors, founders of uh, production houses like Silk Road Rising. And because I firmly believe that the arts generate the needed conversations that are the foundation of the society. But then I ran into young people who say, I want to be active. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what woke is. I'm trying to keep up with all the jargon on all of these medias, Twitter and this and that and the other. I don't know what they're saying, right? If even for those for whom English is a first language, but they haven't lived it, they don't have a clue as to what's going on beyond the video clip, this, that, and the other. But I want to go back to social justice. In my classes, I played that clip from, and I can't remember, this is crazy, I can't remember the name of it. There was a little song that came out in the Libyan uprising at the beginning of the Arab Spring. I played it every day for students coming into that class. And, you know, the object was, what is he protesting? The inability to find employment, the need for his family to eat, right? They got to have a place to stay. And the students sitting there, well, that's not social justice. Social justice for them meant you protested, I don't know, affirmative action, murder in the streets. I said, but he's protesting that too. But then they're telling me that's not a part of the song. Do you remember the song I'm talking about, Maytha?
I'm trying to think about it,
Oh,
because
God, I can't get it.
I have a question. How did they categorize it then, if they didn't categorize it as a social justice movement or demand?
Social justice for them was the things Americans had everything. They had access to
Oh, wow.
that. They didn't go and get it was somehow their fault. They had bread in the stores. They had access. You know what I'm saying? They could get on public welfare and get to a house because they could get housing subsidies. And the Arab students in class we don't have any of that.
Yeah.
You know, there's no Medicare card I can take for additional care. You know, I don't think it was SNAP then, it was some other kind of food stamp, something or the other. I don't have access to that. We have real issues. These are fluff. And I said, no, they're not. You know, the reason you came here was, first of all, to better yourselves, but also to be a good citizen. You got to want to always better the society that you happen to land in, except if you're me. And I've been trying to get deported since I was 17, but there's nowhere to go. But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, there are different understandings. One young woman talked about the Quranic understandings of social justice. I said, who reads the Quran? If people remember to dust it, that's great. You know, they pull it out during Ramadan so they can hurry through somebody else's recitation of what's there. They close it and they're feeling good about themselves.
Yeah.
So social justice, ladies.
Yeah, I think what's very interesting about the conversation is the understanding of what is justice, right? And also what are the issues, and how people understand that, right? How do they understand these immediate issues, right? When you think about your like needs being met, right? Housing, shelter, healthcare,
Right.
and there's also perceptions in the West, like, okay, everybody in the West have these things, but I mean, we have unprecedented unhoused people, like increasingly in, in every location. When I go back home to in the Bay Area to LA, they have lots of people that don't have health care, right? That don't have access to things. And even when we go, when we think about the Arab Spring, what are people, or even right now, like think about like Lebanon, like they've been subjected to austerity programs,
Yes.
forced from the outside, from neoliberal policies from the West, right? And so like they're not getting education, they're not getting the dignity or the social welfare net, so safety net, because of austerity programs pushed on them by the West to say, if you want some of this debt relieved from us, you got to cut all of these programs. And when our regular population is not educated to the extent to understand why they're being robbed of their dignity, right? And they see like maybe the immediate, and maybe in that system may give a little pressure valve for certain classes of people to say, okay, you get your bread, you get your circus, you go watch TV. If you're in the Middle East, you go watch NBC and watch a bunch of soaps. You got your free satellite, and then you're going to look down upon all those people in the slums. Like I saw, whether you're like in Egypt, people living and blaming the shabby, the people, like, oh, it's their fault, right? Blaming the people that are living in the slums, like, oh, they're uncultured. While there's certain like the buffer classes are a little nervous and trying to jockey for position, while there's like wealthy people that are making all the money, and then obviously there's like the West that is like, yeah, we're still making lots of money off of all of you people of color.
That we need to see these castes as global.
It's global. We have global slums, and they don't see that, right? The way that there's the blaming, right? Oh, like Americans have everything, so it's their fault when certain groups aren't getting their dignity. But they reproduce that. I saw children living in the streets, like a beautiful child on the sidewalk, and people step over that child, right? Because there's no social net for that child. And so, and very similar, like in America, like I've seen in wealthy neighborhoods, people will step over somebody that's clearly sick, right, and needs help and attention, and that we blame those people. And when we have that deeper analysis and understanding the issues, the social justice, it's saying like, what I want for myself, I want for other people, because there is enough for all of us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you want to be complacent, like there's people that'll be complacent, that complacency of blaming people, that's the saddest delusion, because like as Muslims, at the core of my principles, right, is like, if you see something wrong, you change it with your hands, or you speak against it, or you hate it with your heart. But your soul is dead when you can walk over a sleeping child in the street and say, that's the way that God meant it to be, and for me to walk over that child, or for me to walk over that unhoused person, right? Or for me to be okay with so many people who are incarcerated who did nothing wrong, right? You know, and so these are the kind of issues, like we have to soften our hearts and to say, like, what is my duty to bring in this mercy? So it's like, what you can name it whatever that you want. Like, I'm like, I don't like the justice. I'm like, you got to be a human being. I'm in the business of creating, like, supporting humanity, support humanizing myself, to at least feel bad because I'm complacent about something that I could easily fix if I wasn't so greedy.
Yes.
Let me before I get to Maytha, I'm going to ask my producer to post this comment. Do you think social media has had a net positive or negative impact for social justice? A positive is the connection, groups, and easier communication, but a negative is the dissemination of misinformation. That should have an ION on the end. Must be an American writing.
Oh, there it is. There's
they got the iron. I love it.
They got it.
So what do you think, Maytha?
I would answer that question even starting with the conversation lead that you brought up, which is the uprisings in Middle East, North Africa, Northeast Africa, like I like to call it. What happened in that moment and the way that was misrecognized, and Marguerite did such a phenomenal job going over with a critical analysis of what's happening globally that pushes people to the edge of going to the street and demanding not just food, not just access to housing, but dignity. And that's what we saw when I and my co-editor Ahmed Shihabuddin put a book together in 2012 of the uprisings, was that in the West, the way that it was narrated, and again, the way that the US and the issues that the US is narrated to the rest of the global world also suffers from this misrecognition and misinformation, is that they were getting to the streets to overthrow dictators because they wanted American Western style democracy, but that wasn't the case. What they were suffering through, and they might not have language for it, was those decades of neoliberal austerity measures and policies. And I mean, even in Saudi Arabia, I met a young girl who said the people that write the laws in this country are McKinsey, which is a private consulting firm that comes from the West. And so that conversation was coming out on social media, and people were watching folks go to the street, and they were disseminating information like flyers to get 1 million people in Tahrir Square, or to get millions of people out in Beirut now. But the thing that they recognized really quickly too is that a lot of people jumped on social media with pseudonyms because they knew the kind of surveillance that the state power that they were trying to oppose would use. And so I think we're starting to get savvy about the surveillance, but every day there's something new. Like, we found out a Muslim app had sold us out and our information to the Department of Defense, right? Was that it? Yeah, the Department of Defense. So there's not just the misinformation campaign, but the surveillance of ourselves and our communities and the work that we do. I mean, it's as insidious as one of these companies called Geophedia, that Color of Change, which is an amazing organization, has pointed to, bought our information from Facebook, sold it to local law enforcement so that when people went to protest, local law enforcement would be able to track people online and through their system to see if they had priors, so that they could get them and take them in and arrest them. And so it was becoming dangerous to even go out on the street because that kind of information was being shared to law enforcement to capture you, basically. And so that logic is operating all over the world, and we have to be conscious and there's no public safety measure for us in the state, so we have to do community work to make that happen. And there's, as we said, great organizations that have been targeting this. But yes, misinformation campaigns requires, I love this show is called Critical Talk, it requires critical thinking skills to be able to filter out what you're receiving. And we have to do both those things at the same time. We have to be able to use this space to connect. And I know it's been such a beautiful place. I met you through a Zoom call. I met Marguerite through reading her blog posts and interviewed her for my master's thesis. And of course, I've read Professor Al-Deen's work for years, but it was through—
Wait a minute, don't put that years on there. I'm not that old, dear.
I mean, people can say years for me. I didn't say decades. I said years.
I love it, love it. Well, I want to come back and I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. This is Professor Al-Deen. I'm having a lovely conversation with two wonderful women who I'm going to have back on the show because they got so much to say. I could do a week on them, but they don't have a time for me to do a week on them, so I'll just catch them when I can. This is Critical Talk. We're talking about social justice post-election. We'll be right back.
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's World, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. So keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
This is Professor Al-Deen on Critical Talk for Muslim Network TV, and we're talking about social justice post-election. And one of my guests, Marguerite Hill, told me to stop calling it whatever I was calling it, and it is Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, which I signed on to. Can't even get the damn name straight. That speaks to having so much on my mind. Forgive me. I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. And I want to talk about it through the lens of, are we becoming a one issue individualistic society? On both sides, people found an issue that resonated with them and voted for one party or the other because that they decided was the most important thing for them in many cases. Blacks and Latinos who had investments, or some way or the other, the Republican Party. And I met a bunch of Arabs down in Florida for which this was the case, who reached out to them when they settled here. Well, it was the Republican Party. It made them aldermen. It wooed them on to educational boards. The Democratic Party ignored them. Cubans and some other of the Spanish-speaking crowd are totally anti-abortion. They're Catholics. They figure if I can get here and I can figure out a way to make it from the food truck on the corner to the store, well, everybody get in line. I've inserted my language. I've made this a bilingual nation. All kinds of goodies. Where is Black Lives Matter? What is really being said here? Because it's a complex of issues. It's a movement. It's not a singular thing. Talk to me, ladies. Miss Collaborative.
I guess I can, I'm not speaking as a representative of Black Lives Matter, but as someone that is a deep supporter, and my operations director is a member of Black Lives Matter LA, and so they have a COVID platform, right? Like they talked about. And in that platform were a number of issues and demands, right? And these are ideals that when you take that analysis of looking, like they're moving towards that systems change that would actually make Los Angeles a much more livable city for Blacks and Latinos, for all marginalized people. What I do find is that from my own anecdotal experience, right? Like from family members that are on the more conservative side or have been Trump supporters, like some people are kind of shocked as me as an African American, like that, African American Muslim, a Black Muslim, and they sort of think we live in silos when many of our families are multiracial. So I'm like, yeah, I know lots of white people. I have white people in my family. Like we have white Trump supporters. I have Black Republicans in our family. So I hear, and usually I'm kind of like, okay, like, you all be what you want to be, but then they like to argue, right? They if they're not Muslim, then they kind of they want to do their Islamophobic thing, talk about that in a certain way. So it's like, I've experienced a lot of, different conversations over the years. And what I do find is like from my observation, as far as like Black Republican or like folks that align with the more they tend to be more singular issue, like maybe it's like, we know some people like my pocketbook was good. I'm voting, like we did good. We're staying with Trump. So that was like a former, like a stepfather one, where, and then it was like another one. It's like, well, back in the South, like when we had the Dixiecrats, so those Democrats back, it's like, we're here for the Lincoln Party. And it's like, so you went back to 1865 and you're still singular issue. You just won't let that go with the Democrats back then. Like there's a switch, right? But it's just like that history, and they're still very loyal, right? So some people like those taxes, right? Or and it doesn't help that our media, right? Like our mainstream cable media, which you would think over the years would get more nuance, lacks absolute nuance, focuses on like one singular issue and just hones that singular cookie cutter message and drills it into people are automatons, like
Right.
my voting, don't take my guns, don't take, and like, so that's where some people, like, you would say like, why do you vote this way? They'll be like, they're gonna take my guns. Or some people may have like, and if like they may say like, well, we don't like big government, we don't like all of this waste, right? And maybe if they had more nuance, like they could actually see like aspects of democratic socialism being more aligned with their libertarian views, right? Like they're just, but like people aren't getting to that. And what we're seeing from what I've observed, right, from lay people, like these aren't like college educated, like these are just like regular, degular folks, right? And when they're talking about certain issues, it's like they're getting the stuff from the media, but it's also like something they got into WhatsApp, a little meme here, meme there. And somebody just rubbed them the wrong way. And it's that one little thing that got to them where it's like, okay, like you could be pro-life for yourself, but if you're just trying to impose that upon other people and make that a law, right? Or if you're, so I mean, and I think what really gets to it is like, because I work as an organizer, like I work with faith-based organizers. So I work with clergy. So I work with the religious left, right? So these are people like myself who are morally conservative. Like I'm morally, but I'm not trying to impose my personal morality out there in the world. What I am trying to do is like, what is the responsibility of government, public life, of ensuring the rights and liberties of each individual and making sure that people's rights aren't being repressed or people aren't denied basic human rights. And so I do think that like we do need to get to that one issue, but what I do find is Black Lives Matter is not a singular issue thing. Like they're not at all.
And that's what I think the media, for one thing, has done. But I also think many of the people don't take away my guns are living on Social Security, which is socialist, and getting their food from X, Y, and Z, which is socialist. They have an unfilled bucket of what socialism is as they're eating, living, and breathing it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to go to the explicit ways of getting things from the government. If you're buying anything from the supermarket that's made with wheat, soy, sugar, that's subsidized by the government.
And thank you.
And so we made that social contract to say, here's the tax money, and then this is what we get in return for a certain kind of distribution. But the problem is that distribution has meant socialism for the wealthy, for the elite, where they get our tax money and the billionaire class is not even taxed. So we don't even get the fruit of that, and it's never distributed.
But that's a different kind of socialism. It's an entitlement. You know, the entitlements at both ends of the spectrum. I want to we're not near ending, but are we letting the issues that many, young and old, took to the streets to bring up to the consciousness die?
You know, I wanna that's a big deep question actually. But I do want to hit some of the things that you mentioned before, because I do want to make the bridge for non-Black people who don't understand how Black Lives Matter affects them. And I think it's critical to think about that, as Marguerite beautifully demonstrated. That's not a single issue. So one thing is that, as Ruthie Wilson Gilmore and Black Lives Matter have said, when Black people win, everybody wins.
Exactly.
And that framework is what gave us free public education. It's what gave us free breakfast program that was started by the Black Panthers. Free public education was started by Black folks who were segregated from the system, and they wanted to provide something for their community. And so they made school free in a country, in a time when education was so elitist that it was only men going and being barristers at the Ivy League schools. And that was the only pipeline. They envisioned something different, new, just, and for the community. And so we became beneficiaries of that, including when the doors opened in 1965 for immigration from countries that were historically restricted, and places in Africa, Middle East, South America, Asia, all parts of Asia were flooding in 1965. So why 1965? Because the civil rights movement created a liberalizing trend in the legislature, and then they overturned a national origins quota system that was put into place in the 1920s when there was the rise of nativism. So when they attacked the foundations of white supremacy, all the other parts became dismantled, and everybody been offended. So when we think of affirmative action as a Black issue, of course there's a race consciousness factor that should be put into place to repair centuries of exclusion, of marginalization of Black folks. But that opened the doors for all of us. I mean, not necessarily Arabs, because we're still classified as white, but that's a whole nother story that we're trying to fight back against.
But that is where the crux of one issue lies. You haven't solved, not you in particular, but there hasn't been a resolution to those centuries of exclusion. Now I got everybody that wants to jump in my damn wagon. Why wouldn't I push back? I will push you up and over and probably run you over with the wheels. How dare you?
Yeah.
Jump on my wagon when my wagon hasn't even reached its destination yet.
Yeah. I just really quickly, I think a good demonstration is Black Lives Matter, a movement for Black Lives, put out a Breathe Act, which is calling to divest from brutal police forces and reinvest into community and community-led initiatives around public safety.
Do you have a site for that we can
it's breatheact.org. And you know, the folks who signed on to this were Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and actor Rami Youssef. Those are Arab folks who are they're part of a movement of people who are starting to see we need to build up through a BLM message and vision, including, we talked about this, the Rami show is trying to uplift Muslim Arc through selling, fanfare from the site, and donating proceeds to Muslim Arc.
Is this the Rami that comes on Hulu?
Yes.
Is that the Rami we saw the little brief promo from?
Oh, this is the Breathe Act. Oh, you guys got fancy.
We are fancy over here, dear. Thank you very much.
You could look at all the people who've sponsored the bill. So, Rashida and Ayanna Pressley are, I think, the only congressional folks.
Oh, this is outstanding. Thank you for that. I'm trying to get all the ways that we're having many conversations, work we must support to give all of us a showcase to add to other showcases. And I want to reiterate the fact that the three of us started a conversation on Muslim Arc's monthly discussion table. Now, how I can get all of you to jump on and join Muslim Mark, I don't know, but it is a place where these are the kinds of conversations we have. I will continue to try to bring them to Critical Talk because it is about critical talk. And so I'm going to ask that we do two things. I want you to think about what happens to professors and students in this time. Number two, what are you reading? I'm changing my question list. What are you reading? Let's take it first. What are you reading, Marguerite?
Oh, I'm reading a lot of things. One, I've been doing a lot of exploring like Afrofuturism and sci-fi. So, like I'm actually like rereading the whole Dune series and thinking about the politics, but also looking at Octavia Butler, and some of the newer ones like Children of Blood and Bone, right? And really trying to think about new like how are we representing like our political realities and our imagination, and then from an anti-racism lens, like I mean I just had read and I've been kind of turning around like some of the stuff with Rebecca Wilkerson's cast. I think it's like an interesting, but there's some things I'm like, oh, there's some deeper stuff we really have to go into from of understanding anti-Semitism, whiteness, like, and how that is key. So I'm always scanning literature, always reading articles. And in the back, I'm trying to see what is my next one. There's another really good book, Culture Warlords. So it's like I'm really trying to understand. It's like, well, what are the logic that makes this, how is this getting normalized? How is white identity extremism normalized? And Talia Levine does a really great job of like kind of investigatory journalism through that. So those are like a bunch of books I'm reading. So if you ever see me kind of scattered, it's like I'm reading tons of things through like each day and throughout the day.
Okay, Maytha, what are you reading?
Sorry, I had to go get my book, so you saw me like push my face up against the screen. I love hearing this is my jam. I am right now in the middle of Toni Morrison's The Source of Self-Regard, and it's a collection of her essays.
Let us go back to yeah, there you go. Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, so there we go. The Source of Self-Regard. And so it has essays from decades ago. One of my friends is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. So I sent her a picture of one called Black Matters with a little parentheses around the S. But she has so much writing around the idea of the foreigner's home. And this is also like a post 9/11 reflection around migration, and also thinking about how this is the greatest moment for her. She's not even looking at what a couple of years ago people were focusing on, which was climate refugees, but she's thinking about it presciently in the early 2000s,
right?
And then really thinking about like migration from south to north for Black folks, and then the global migration, what it means to find and have a sense of home. But she also has this section I was looking.
But we only have a few minutes. Show me what else
sorry,
because I gotta go. But show me what else.
Okay. So there's a section in there that says racism and fascism, so everybody has to read that. And during Western civilization, I'm trying to write a piece about Western civilizational thinking to unravel it. And so it's edited by Silvia Frederici. I have tons of other books. Clearly, I have my Octavia Butlers here. And, I have some Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
I love
for my fiction. So there's some hardcore essaying, and then there's academics and fiction.
Well, I think even though we have to go, I think I'm going to work on having another kind of online book club, because people are curious where to start reading. What should I read? This is Professor Al-Deen for Muslim Network TV, and this has been Critical Talk with two exciting young women, Marguerite Hill and Dr. Maytha Alhassen, and I will get you back. Have no doubt I will intrude on your calendars. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Assalamualaikum.